Jojo's Bizarre Adventure has a wide cast of characters, with each part being unique and having its own contained stories that change things up while also keeping the concepts that make it what it is. When it comes to the whole lineage of Jojos throughout the series, the most underrated of them is the one that started it all, Jonathan Joestar. It makes sense as to why people would forget Jonathan, since for one, he is part of the first part, Phantom Blood. While it isn't bad, when in comparison to the other arcs, Phantom Blood tends to be in the lower tier. Another reason is the first part is pretty short compared to the other parts, which gives Jonathan less screen time than the other Jojos. But even though part 1 is short, it isn't bad, and it is still solid, and Jonathan Joestar is a great character in Jojo overall. To start, Jonathan lived in a rich home with his father, who set high expectations for him in being a gentleman in England. When Erina was getting teased, Jonathan defends her but loses a fight and later feels shame. But he reminds Erina about how the reason why he defended her was because it was a gentleman's duty. And at this point, we know what Jonathan's priorities are and what he at least strives for. Soon, Dio would arrive, and as we all know, he doesn't like Jonathan that much, and he plans to make his life miserable. He does this by creating one of the most popular memes and kissing Erina, Jonathan's love. And of course, after this, Jonathan would be furious and give the beating that Dio deserved, not only for kissing Erina, but also so that he wouldn't live in fear in Dio's shadow. This is where the rivalry between Jonathan and Dio would start, and since Dio was playing the victim at the end, Jonathan's father, Joestar, sees this and points out that for now, Dio and Jonathan are going to have to get along even though they despise each other deep inside. From all that has happened, a lot of bad stuff has happened to Jonathan. Since his father values Dio more than his own son, his dog Danny got killed, and Dio went on to kiss his girlfriend. After this, you'd start to sympathize for Jonathan and at least root for him. And his journey for later would be to not only stop Dio, but also earn his father's respect. Another part is when he meets Robert Speedwagon for the first time, and even though he had the advantage to end Speedwagon and the Ogre Street Gang, he doesn't because of his values. While he may take the violent approach when needed, his priority isn't to viciously beat anyone, especially when that wasn't his own objective to begin with. Speedwagon sees this and sees how special Jonathan is and would become his ally.
Just like he did mine. I like the cut of his jib. Sure, he's naive, but he's a gentleman through and through, this one. I want to know the name of him who spared me.
Jonathan Joestar.
Well, pleased to make your acquaintance.
Later on, Dio would become a vampire and kill George Joestar, and George would die in his son's arms. And at this moment is when Jonathan has to make the decision to stop Dio, while also remaining noble. Even though he has gone through bad things in his life, he still tries to remain noble, unlike Dio, who has rejected his humanity. Not only does Speedwagon see how special Jonathan is, but also one of his opponents, Bruford, and at the end of the fight, he doesn't kill Bruford right away, since he didn't have to at this point, and Bruford saw how much faith Jonathan had, and how much Jonathan sees the good in people. After Jonathan's fight with Dio in the castle, he mourns his fallen brother, because while it was his choice to stop Dio, he still feels awful about having to stop him, and would have wanted to get along with him in the beginning, but sadly he couldn't. Even during his tragic death, which is one of the most honorable deaths, he stops Dio's plan, but when he dies, he is hugging Dio's head with compassion, with Dio himself shocked and sad at the same time about how his brother has just died. Dio knew that Jonathan was a special person and that he would have to move on without him. While part 1 was a story about good and evil, it is also a story about nobility and how one person went to become good and noble and the other fell into darkness. It is a story about two brothers who had hard lives when they were kids, but both of them took different paths. Even though Jonathan's character might sound bland, his qualities make him special and how he represents the Joestar family. Not to mention how he converted one enemy into a friend, with that being Speedwagon himself, who is one of the most loyal allies and would later serve the Joestar family for years to come. When Hirohiko Araki is interviewed about Jonathan, he said that even though some people might see him as boring, he wanted a symbol of purity and dignity and a symbol of justice, which was what Jonathan was supposed to be for the Sirius, as well as the Joestar family later on. While Jojo's Bizarre Adventure would get better in the later parts, we can't all forget where it all started, and for the first part, it wasn't very bad, and it was pretty decent for the most part. Part 1 is a treasured Bizarre Adventure. And as for Jonathan, out of all the Jojos, he may be great, he may be bland and boring, but he was, without a doubt, a gentleman.